and there's nobody there to watch them. At that time, what will they do? If the only reason they were practicing was because we were there, our presence, we were watching them, we were ensuring and forcing them to do the right thing, then yes, for 16, 17 years, outwardly they will practice Islam. But the day they have a chance and they step out from our supervision, because they're not trained to make the right decisions, they will make bad decisions. They will make decisions that are harmful for them. And we will be confused because we will say to ourselves, for 16 years, this is not what I taught them. But if the only reason they were doing what they were doing was because we told them, they didn't know for themselves why they should do it. The only reason what they were obeying Allah was because we were policing them. Then the day that they don't have that supervision and they're faced with multiple choices, they can make some bad decisions. The goal is that by that time, when they will inevitably leave home, even if we try to keep them close, the university nearby, they drive every day, come back home at night, eventually they're going to get married. They're going to go live by themselves in a different house. We will not be supervising them. They have to be trained to make the right decisions. Because people, human beings, are only convinced of that truth that they have discovered for themselves. Until then, it's just imitation. It's just imitation. The human being is just doing it to make someone happy, to imitate them, to meet the standards of somebody else. They're not convinced. The day that they reflect on a certain practice or a certain action and they're convinced this is the right thing to do, regardless of what anybody else says, this is the right thing to do, that's the day that they've now chosen this. And this is the day that this is now the truth to them. It's not mere imitation. I want to tell you a story about a university student that I once counseled. He complained to me about, it was his first year in university, first few months. And he was really confused. He said, Shaykh, I don't know what's going on, but when I'm here on campus, when I'm living on campus throughout the week, he would go home on the weekends. When I'm here on campus during the week, I don't pray. Like, I don't pray a single prayer. But he says, interestingly, when I go home on the weekend, I pray all my prayers. Say, I don't know what's going on. And he said, Sheikh, I know it's prayer time. I have an app. And when Dhuhr comes in, the app goes off, and sometimes the adhan, and I know it's Dhuhr time, and I'm studying. And I just don't have it within me to get up and go pray. I don't know what's wrong. I said to him, well, why do you pray at home? He said, well, when I'm at home, my mother comes to me. She comes to the door. She says, did you pray? And I say, no. She's like, well, get up and pray. So I get up and I pray. I said, how's this been? How long have you been doing this? He said, my whole life. My whole life, whenever it's prayer time, my mother or my father, someone comes and says, did you pray? And I just wait for them to come. I'll be playing video games, and if they don't come, I won't get up. But when they come to the door and say, did you pray? I say, no, I haven't prayed. So I get up and I go pray. And he was very concerned. He's like, I don't know why I'm missing my prayers. I said, it may be that your whole life, you were never praying for Allah. You didn't have a relationship, an independent relationship with Allah. You were merely following someone else's orders. And when you remove the orders, there's nobody there to remind you and to supervise, did you pray? You're left to choose it for yourself. And you've never experienced that. So you don't know what to do. You don't know how to, muster the willpower to say, let me put my assignment aside and let me go pray to my Lord. You haven't done that. I said, as troubling as this is for you right now, this is an opportunity. This is an opportunity for you to finally develop your own independent relationship with Allah. It seems up until now, your relationship with Allah has been mediated by your parents. But when they're there, then the prayer is established. When they're not there, then there's no prayer. You don't have your own relationship with Allah. And if you're 6 years old, it's okay. You're only 6. I said, you're 18, 19. You're a grown man. It's time for you to have your own relationship with Allah, that you turn to Him. This is what we find with the prophets. The prophets, like Yaqub alayhi salam, they trained their children that when they passed away, that their children would go on worshiping Allah, because their children were not doing it for the parents, they were doing it for Allah. Allah in Surah Al-Baqarah, He mentions that the time of death came near to Yaqub alayhi salam, and he called his sons. إِذْ حَضَرَ يَعْقُوبَ الْمَوْتِ إِذْ قَالَ لِبَنِيهِ مَا تَعْبُدُونَ مِن بَعْدِي. And so he asked them, when I pass away, what are you going to worship? And that's a question we can ask right now to every young Muslim here who has their parents alive. But if your parents were to pass away today, and may Allah give them a long life with good deeds, would you continue worshiping? Would you continue coming for Jumu'ah? There's nobody to ask you, hey, did you pray Jumu'ah today? There's nobody to ask you, where's that meat from? Is it halal or not? There's nobody to ask you about whether or not you're fasting. What would you do? The Prophet Yaqub asked his sons, what would you worship when I pass away? They said, Na'budu ilahak. We will worship your Lord. Wa ilaha abaik. And the Lord of your forefathers. Ibrahim wa Ishaq. Ibrahim, Ismail, Ishaq. We would worship that Allah. That is not just your Lord, but it's the Lord of all the prophets before you. They had all developed independent relationships with Allah. Now, I want to speak about the impact of certain parenting styles on our child's relationship with Allah. We spoke about this in the last khutbah. Very briefly, I alluded to it towards the end of the khutbah. We spoke about permissive parenting. Permissive parenting is a style where the parent desires to be the friend of the child, rather than a loving and empathetic authority figure. The goal of the parent is to be their child's friend. And there's a time for that. I'm not saying that there should not be any dynamic of friendship, but from a very, very young age, when a parent is their main goal is, let me keep my child happy, let me make sure that my child likes me. Permissive parenting. There's very few rules. Why? Because if you impose rules on a child, the child starts to see you as what? As an obstacle, preventing fun. It's 11:30 p.m. They got school the next day. Do we tell them to go to sleep? If we tell them to go to sleep, they might not like it. A permissive parent would say, just let them play. Whatever keeps them happy. A permissive parent does not usually enforce consequences. And so because of this, not only religiously, but psychologically, there are many harmful consequences. The child begins or can begin to take unhealthy risks because there's no boundaries and there's no consequences from the parents. Look, we want our children to venture out into the world, to face their fears, to overcome obstacles. But these must be calculated risks at the appropriate time, with adequate training. But without any rules and boundaries and consequences, young children can grow up to just take risks that they know are harmful, but there's nobody to stop them. They can begin to rebel against any authority because they never got used to authority. They can develop many unhealthy habits because there's nobody to hold them back. There's nobody to hold them back from their own vices. There's nobody to help them curb their desires, their nafs. And so the parent grows up, or the child grows up, and the parent's trying to win the approval of the child. The child needs guidance and boundaries for their own well-being, and the parent doesn't want to enforce them. That's permissive parenting. When we reflect on that from an Islamic perspective, one of the first things you notice is that Islam does set limits. Islam does highlight consequences, not only in this dunya but in the hereafter. Islam does have prescribed teachings. And if a parent is going to be permissive in their parenting, then they will not enforce any of those laws. And when the child gets older, it would be no surprise then that this child does not respect the boundaries and the limits of Allah, does not respect religious authority of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the commands in the Quran, the prohibitions, because this child's not used to that. The second style we have is neglectful. This is where the parent is uninterested. The parent is self absorbed. They're busy with their own stuff. They don't have time for their children. They're busy trying to do something else, whether it's something as noble as trying to earn a living for their family, or they're just busy with their friends. They're busy with something else, their own self image, and in the process, they neglect their children. They're absent. Other things take priority over their own children. And again, in the absence of a parent, neglectful parenting, it leads to this child not knowing what the boundaries are. There's no one there to tell them. And there's no emotional relationship with that parent. See, with permissive parenting, this child might from a young age do what? Actually love their child, parent a little bit. Because their parent gives them everything. Their parent gives them everything. But as they get older and the parent starts to see the negative impacts, naturally, most parents would start to try to impose limits. But at that time, the child's, at the age of 7 years old, for the first time, they're noticing that their parents are saying, no, you can't do this. No, you can't go there. No, you have to be home. And this child's not used to this. And they can really rebel. And so these first two parenting styles, we're not really here to discuss them. They're harmful for trying to raise a child who will be obedient to Allah, who will follow the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, because the primary ingredient is missing. There is no guidance being offered to these children according to these two parenting styles. What we're really interested in is the next two, which are authoritarian and authoritative. Authoritarian parenting is very, very rules based and limits based. But it's done, those rules and those boundaries are enforced in a very tyrannical way. No explanations. There's little warmth. There's no emotional connection with the child. It's like a dictator parent. You do this. And if you dare not do this, this is the punishment. No emotional connection. No training the child to understand why they should do this. Dictatorship. And what's very interesting is that such children who grow up with dictating parents who are very much like dictators, who are very authoritarian, they often grow up and they actually perform well. Interestingly, a lot of them will perform well, whether it's academically or they'll jump through the hoops of life, whatever it is that the parents set for them. But there's a real downside to this approach. They perform well because it's so fear-based. They're terrified of their parents. They're terrified of disappointing them. They're terrified of letting them down. But themselves, they lack self-determination. Their whole lives, the parents have been so overbearing that this child never learned to speak up for themselves, never had confidence in making a decision. The child has no self-confidence, lacks, autonomy, very uncomfortable trying to make decisions in life. And so while they've been brought far along, they don't know how to move forward. They can end up getting married but not know how to go about handling a marriage. Because their whole lives they became dependent on being told what to do. They were not trained to make decisions. They didn't know what to do. Authoritative parenting does hold high expectations. The parents hold high expectations, but they are flexible. They're assertive, but there's emotional connection and warmth. There's a relationship. There are conversations. There's explanations. There's listening to, It's a dialogue, it's a conversation. It's not just the parent making announcements and the child just listens. No, it's back and forth. It's you're guiding them through the thought process. You're explaining to them why when you look at this situation, this is why you need to look at it this way. And if you make this mistake, it will be harmful for you. And so there's a complete explanation. So we don't want our children to merely comply outwardly, like authoritarian parenting attempts to ensure. Rather, we as parents, our goal is to ensure that our children develop a relationship with Allah. See, when they're younger, we mediate that relationship. We are the ones who impact what that relationship with Allah looks like. But eventually, they have to develop their own relationship where you let them go make a decision. And this is, I've seen this many times where a child is now, I say child, but they're 22 years old, example, and they want to go make a decision in life and their parents don't trust them. At 22, they say, Dad, Mom, I want to do this. No, you don't know what you're doing. 22 years old. If at 22 they don't know what they're doing, what were we doing for 22 years? And wallahi, I'm not here to shame parents. I'm here to say that the day will come, they will need to make their own decisions. If they get old enough and you pass away as a parent, what do they do? If Allah grants them children, how do they bring up their children? How do they guide their children when they don't know how to guide themselves? They were not trained to do so. And so, one of the last thing I'll mention here for today is that one of the more concerning things for us is that the concept of Allah, the concept of God that we as parents have, we often pass it on to our children. A lot of the values and the beliefs and the perspectives we hold, we can often pass those on to our children. And a lot of us know that's the case. But we sometimes forget that even the way that we think about Allah, we can pass that on to our children as well. Why? In how we speak about Allah. If for us as parents, if Allah is this distant, cold, punitive, punishing Lord, to us as parents, that's our understanding of Allah. Then when we speak to our children about Allah, when we try to tell them why they need to obey Allah, we will speak from that lens. And that child will grow up with that image. They took that image from us. Now, if you're a parent and you come from a culture that's collectivistic, where you're trying to impress your friends or blend and conform to your friends, and all of them have the same image of God, it's not going to be much of an issue for you. You will show up to the masjid because all of your friends show up to the masjid and all of your relatives show up to the masjid. Why is everyone showing up to the masjid? Because we don't want to go to hell. That's our Islam. We don't want to go to hell. That's it. But then you have a child whose friends are not of that mentality. A child who's growing up and has many options around him or her. And this child looks and says, wait, do I really want to follow a religion, obey a God who my whole life is just about trying not to make him unhappy? Just trying to avoid his wrath so I don't end up in hell? And many children growing up are not interested in such a religion. They're not interested in a relationship with such a Lord. But where did they get that flawed understanding? They got it from us as parents. And so part of how we can correct this now, and that's my khutbah inshallah topic for next week, is how do we begin to correct a distorted God image, an understanding of God within ourselves, within our children. One of the misconceptions we have is we need to address it intellectually. No doubt, there needs to be education, but it's not sufficient. Because the problem usually is not related to their intellectual understanding of God. It's the emotional attachment that they had to those individuals who taught them religion, whether it be their religious teachers or their parents. And so when the problem is emotional, then an intellectual discourse does not address the problem. And so inshallah, we will speak next week about, inshallah, God willing, and if Allah grants us life, we will speak about this topic, inshallah, of how we can reconnect emotionally with our children and try our best whatever we can do to repair that understanding and that relationship with Allah. أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله لي ولكم ولسائر المسلمين من كل ذنب فاستغفروه إنه هو الغفور الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين والعاقبة للمتقين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وآله وصحبه أجمعين. نشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له، ونشهد أن سيدنا محمدا عبده ورسوله. أما بعد، فقد قال الله تعالى: يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله وكونوا مع الصادقين. وقال تعالى: إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما. اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على سيدنا محمد وآله وصحبه. اللهم اغفر لنا ما قدمنا وما أخرنا وما أسررنا وما أعلنا وما أنت أعلم به منا. أنت المقدم وأنت المؤخر، لا إله إلا أنت. اللهم اغفر لنا وللمؤمنين والمؤمنات والمسلمين والمسلمات الأحياء منهم والأموات، إنك سميع قريب مجيب الدعوات. اللهم ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار. اللهم انصر الإسلام والمسلمين. اللهم أعز الإسلام والمسلمين. اللهم انصر إخواننا المستضعفين المظلومين في غزة وفي جميع فلسطين وفي السودان وفي الصين وفي كشمير وفي بنغلاديش وفي كل مكان يا رب العالمين. اللهم كن لهم عونا ونصيرا وظهيرا ومغيثا. اللهم حرر المسجد الأقصى من أيدي الغاصبين. اللهم رده إلى رحاب المسلمين ووفقنا للصلاة فيه قبل الممات يا رب العالمين. آمين يا رب العالمين. يقول الله تعالى: إن الله يأمر بالعدل والإحسان وإيتاء ذي القربى وينهى عن الفحشاء والمنكر والبغي يعظكم لعلكم تذكرون. يقول الله تعالى: فاذكروني أذكركم واشكروا لي ولا تكفرون. قوموا إلى صلاتكم رحمكم الله.
الله أكبر الله أكبر. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله. حي على الصلاة، حي على الفلاح. قد قامت الصلاة، قد قامت الصلاة. الله أكبر الله أكبر. لا إله إلا الله.
استووا استقيموا وتراصوا حاذوا بين المناكب وسدوا الخلل. Please straighten the rows, stand shoulder to shoulder, filling in the gaps. Allahu Akbar. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين. اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. وسيق الذين اتقوا ربهم إلى الجنة زمرا حتى إذا جاءوها وفتحت أبوابها وقال لهم خزنتها سلام عليكم طبتم فادخلوها خالدين. وقالوا الحمد لله الذي صدقنا وعده وأورثنا الأرض نتبوأ من الجنة الجنة حيث نشاء فنعم أجر العاملين وترى الملائكة حافين من حول العرش يسبحون بحمد ربهم وقضي بينهم بالحق وقيل الحمد لله رب العالمين. الله أكبر. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. والضحى والليل إذا سجى ما ودعك ربك وما قلى وللآخرة خير لك من الأولى ولسوف يعطيك ربك فترضى ألم يجدك يتيما فآوى ووجدك ضالا فهدى ووجدك عائلا فأغنى فأما اليتيم فلا تقهر وأما السائل فلا تنهر وأما بنعمة ربك فحدث. الله أكبر. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. Assalamu alaikum. Just a few Jumu'ah announcements and updates, inshallah. Penny Appeal Canada is here today to collect donations for many of the emergency reliefs that they have around the world, especially for our brothers and sisters in Gaza. Please donate generously on your way out. We value your feedback and want to hear from you. Help ISNA Canada improve our services by participating in our Canada Community Service Organization Survey. Visit isnacanada.com/survey to share your thoughts on our programs and services. Your input is essential to help us better serve our community. We are excited for a weekend of remembrance, praise, and learning about our beloved Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. We have a community program in praise of our beloved Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam with our local shuyukh, Shaykh Hussam, Shaykh Usman, and our visiting scholar Shaykh Yasser Fahmi tomorrow, Saturday, September 7th at 6:30 p.m. in the Musalla. Visit isnacan.com/events and see how to register, inshallah. We also have Sheikh Yasser Fahmi joining us for an intensive on the book on Al-Shama'il al-Muhammadiyah on Sunday, September 8th. Accompanying him will be our local shuyukh, Sheikh Usman and Sheikh Hussam, from 10:30 a.m. to 6 p.m. For more information and how to register, visit isnacan.com/events. Tickets are very limited, so please secure your spot as soon as possible. In collaboration with Al Maghrib Institute, we ask you to join us on Saturday, September 21st for a full day program with Sheikh Muhammad Al Shinawi on proofs of prophethood, belief in the messengers. Visit isnacan.com/proofs to register now. Isnacan's Quran Academy is excited to announce their new semester starting this September, which will go run until December. This self paced program offers reading, recitation, memorization with qualified teachers.